Bonjour tout le monde. J'ouvre maintenant la séance.
I call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 15 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts.
It's in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room. And I know we have one witness who's appearing remotely via the Zoom application. I'd like to remind participants of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. This, of course, will apply more to the second half of the meeting when we're discussing some committee business. We all have speaking orders for the moment. And, of course, I'll organize any comments that are to be raised in the order I receive them. And if you're on Zoom and wish to participate, I don't think any members will be on Zoom. Same thing, just raise your hand. Conformément à l'article 108.3G du règlement,
Pursuant to Standing Order 108.3G, the committee is resuming its study on Report 5 Professional Services Contracts of the 2024 Reports 5 to 7 of the Auditor General of Canada.
Unfortunately, we had one, before I introduced the witnesses, we had one witness who was in the end unavailable today. So I have cut the committee time for this a little shorter. I think I'm going to do 2 rounds, which will give members of the government 3 slots, the official opposition 2, et le Bloc Québécois 2. If there's a desire, we might go into another half round, but we're going to see how it goes. So without further ado, I'll just introduce our witnesses today from the Trans Mountain Corporation, Mr. Todd Stack, Chief Financial Officer. Nice to have you in today, sir. And as I said, we will not be keeping you here for the 2 hours. We'll just run through some questions here. And from the Office of the Auditor General, Andrew Hayes, the Deputy Auditor General, good to see you, along with José Surprenant, Director. Nice to see you as well. Mr. Stack, you have the floor for an opening statement of about 5 minutes, and we'll hear a few words from Mr. Hayes. So without further ado, please.
Thank you. I hope the audio is coming through okay. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I'm pleased to appear today on behalf of Trans Mountain Corporation. My name is Todd Stack, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Trans Mountain, and I've been in my role since October of 2024. I'm joining you today from Calgary. In the spirit of respect, I honor and acknowledge the traditional territories and the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda Nations. Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Calgary Elbow, and Calgary Nose Hill Métis districts. I'm pleased to be with you today on behalf of our organization, which was listed in the Office of the Auditor General of Canada 2024 report on professional services contracts. The Government of Canada purchased the Trans Mountain Pipeline System and the expansion project in 2018. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of the Canada Development Investment Corporation, governed by an independent board of directors with a mandate to operate in a commercial manner. Today, we operate Canada's only pipeline system transporting oil products to the West Coast. Trans Mountain began operations in 1953, and we began operation of the expanded system in May of 2024. The pipeline is delivering on its potential to reach offshore markets, generating revenue for regional and national economies. In 2025, the first full year of operating the expanded system, Trans Mountain is on track to return over $1.7 billion to the federal government in interest payments and other disbursements. Regarding the study at hand, we welcome the additional oversight and recommendations we received from external experts, including the Auditor General and this committee. The Office of the Auditor General reviewed one contract with McKinsey, which Trans Mountain entered into in late 2022 and was completed in late 2023. The contract was issued during the construction phase of the expansion project. A guiding principle of our project execution was the duty of project management to maximize shareholders' return by optimizing costs and meeting scheduled milestones. The contractor was retained based on their unique experience in the implementation of cost and productivity programs. We agree with the Auditor General that 2 key components of a procurement program are to first ensure the federal government receives value for money from external contracts, and second, to ensure contracts are awarded in accordance with procurement policies, which includes ensuring that appropriate conflict of interest safeguards are in place. With regard to the first component, I can attest that Trans Mountain received value for money from this work. With regard to the second component, The Auditor General report provided a single recommendation for departments to proactively ensure that there are no real or perceived conflicts of interest among those involved in the procurement process. We have acted on this recommendation as reflected in the action plan filed. We have implemented a more proactive conflict of interest declaration process, which includes an in-depth questionnaire to identify all potential types of conflict of interest, and we've instituted annual mandatory conflict of interest training. The annual training reinforces the requirement to declare any potential conflicts of interest when it arises and not wait for the annual declaration process. In addition, the company maintains a robust whistleblower program, which further enforces and identifies potential conflicts. In conclusion, Mr. Chair and committee members, we have acted on the recommendation received, and we are committed to work diligently to uphold our procurement standards and policies.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hayes, I understand you have a few comments you'd like to make. The floor is yours, please.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to discuss our 2024 report on professional services contracts. I want to begin by acknowledging that this hearing is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Joining me today is José Surprenant, a director in our office. Puisque nous étions devant ce comité,
We were before the committee in October, so I won't be rereading my speaking notes. I understand that this was shared with members. The Trans Mountain Corporation was not part of the representative sample of 33 contracts that were examined in order to look into resource optimization. In order to better support the work of the committee, I would give you back the rest of my 5 minutes.
the committee may have.
Thank you very much. I'll now begin the first round, which will consist of 3 members, 6 minutes each. Monsieur Detel, je pense que c'est vous qui va nous commencer.
Monsieur Deltel, I think you're starting, so you have 6 minutes. Good afternoon, colleagues. Always a pleasure to see you all, and welcome to our witnesses, Mr. Hayes, Ms. Surprenant, and Mr. Stack. Thank you for being a witness for today's meeting. I'll start with you, Mr. Stack. Mr. Stack, was Gerald Butts hired in any capacity to make recommendations for McKinsey and Trans Mountain?
I thank the member for his question. No, Mr. Butts, there was no recommendation from Mr. Butts or any government in the hiring of McKinsey.
Est-ce que Madame Dawn Farrell
Ms. Dawn Farrell, who was at the major projects for the federal government, was she involved in recommending hiring McKinsey for Trans Mountain?
Yeah, the decision to hire to hire McKinsey was approved by the executive level, and at the time, Dawn Farrell was the chief executive officer at Trans Mountain, and so she was part of that decision-making process.
Monsieur Stack, est-ce que vous acceptez?
Mr. Stack, would you accept to table with the...
Moi, ça m'arrive jamais de toute façon.
This never happens to me.
Attack, but there is some issue here to address, just technical issue. Monsieur Stack, je reviens à la question.
Mr. Stack, I'm going to come back to my question. Would you accept that your company share with us all documents relating to Ms. Farrell for discussions that occurred at the board of Trans Mountain when she was there regarding hiring McKinsey?
I'm not sure I'm able to make that commitment at this point in time, but I would commit to get back to the committee with a response and provide that to the committee clerk.
Okay. Je vous rappelle que
Trans Mountain is a company that was under the jurisdiction of the federal government, and Ms. Farrell plays a role that is under federal jurisdiction, and we want to know what happened, and Trans Mountain received a major contract for McKinsey that is under investigation. Mr. Stack, it's not normal that communications by Ms. Farewell on this issue, or rather, we would like to receive them. We want to see what happened and the role that she could have played.
Yeah, I mean, our board and the discussions at our board are admitted, and there are members of the Department of Finance, as well as CDEV sitting on the board of directors, and so they would have that information as well.
On comprend que le projet de
The Trans Mountain project is a significant one. We also know that Trans Mountain received a significant budget without any control in the spending. In 2017, it was assessed at $7.4 billion, and in 2023, it was $34 billion. So that's almost 5 times higher than expected. That's not a slight increase. This is a significant increase, and it's taxpayers that had to pay the bills. Ms. Farrell was in her position before giving the $33 million contract to McKinsey. Why did you give a non-competitive contract even though the rules are very clear?
Sorry, Mr. Stack, you are on mute, actually. If you could take it from the top, please.
Apologies. Let me just touch on a couple of items there. So first of all, the overall cost of the projects are currently under review with the CER as part of our ongoing rate process, and they have access to all of the documentations associated with the costs and the cost increases over time in order to assess and make as part of our toll. With regards to the sole source direct assign of the contract to McKinsey, at the time, look, the company had a lot of cost and productivity initiatives underway right from the beginning of the project in order to manage schedule and costs. And when McKinsey was hired, it was mid-project. It was about halfway through, or even a little bit more than halfway through the project. And just in the ongoing desire to continue to look for ways to continually improve both schedule and costs, it was decided that we needed to bring in somebody who had very unique and specialized skill to help us look for opportunities that weren't already underway.
Mais ce qu'il faut comprendre, c'est que Madame.
But Ms. Farrell is at the Major Projects Office, where they will be receiving billions of dollars to invest. According to the report by the Auditor General that we are currently looking at, the Trans Mountain budget increased significantly, and contracts did not respect the rules about public and private companies. Ms. Farewell, what should Ms. Farewell do to improve what she's doing according to her experience with Trans Mountain?
Yeah, I think the Auditor's General report was actually very comprehensive in some of the key factors associated with good procurement practices, and we would endorse those as well. And I'm sure Ms. Farrell would also take those onto her new role in the Major Projects Office. First of all, having good policies in place, requesting competitive bids is always is definitely a preferred practice. In our particular case, as a standalone corporation, sole sourcing is an approved method of assigning work, but we do look to RFP as many projects as we can, or as many contracts as we can.
Encore une petite question, ça va pour le moment.
Do you have another question, or you? No? Thank you, Mr. Deltel. We have
Ms. Texer.
Ms. Tesser-Dirksen. Apologies.
Minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Mr. Stack, for joining us today. I have some questions of a more general nature. I do understand the contract value awarded was around $32 million, or the amount spent so far as of September 30th, 2023 was $32 million, in that range, and it was a non-competitive contract that was that's the subject of the meeting today. So as far as the Auditor General's report, I think the concern there was that the non-competitive contract was granted without a justification that was clearly linked to your own policies, or one of the exceptions in the competitive procurements contained in the policy, if I'm getting that correct. So I want to start with kind of an obvious question here. Your department made a decision to contract out, and as I understand, that's up to the department. You have deference to determine that. But the question I have is with respect to what you were expecting, what benefit you were expecting to realize by contracting out as opposed to keeping the work internal.
Great. I thank the member for her question. So a couple of items there. Maybe I'll put in there. So as reported in the Auditor General report, the costs were $32 million. The final costs were actually $33 million, just for reference and just for a bit more background. The initial engagement with McKinsey was estimated for about $18 million in a 6-month contract. And then because of the success and the value created in the project, it was decided to extend that contract out, which ended up with the ultimate costs around the $32 million. And it was extended out for about 12 months as opposed to the original 6-month contemplated. Apologies. Then the remaining part of the question was the justification.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Auditor General was pointing to I don't think there was necessarily a concern with your decision. It was a concern with the justification for your decision for contracting out. And what type of benefit would your department expect to realize by contracting something like this out rather than looking internally?
Yeah, exactly. As I mentioned, project controls, innovative ideas, initiatives to increase productivity were something that was initiated at the project right from the beginning in the planning phases. But as has been mentioned, the project did see ongoing pressures for both cost and schedule, and so it was decided to bring in an outside party again to try and generate new ideas and new momentum in the company to both meet schedule and drive costs down.
Just on that point, sorry to interrupt, Mr. Stack. So would it be your opinion that you may have actually found some efficiencies by contracting out? Or am I taking that a step too far?
Absolutely. McKinsey, one of their big skills is bringing in cost and productivity improvement initiatives, and the entire purpose is to get multiples of value from what their costs are, and the benefits created by the initiatives. And I would say not the initiatives, but the process that McKinsey brought, and then the initiatives implemented by the team were multiples of the $33 million that was spent on their services. And that is the measuring factor to decide, again, we kept them for 6 months, we extended it for 6 months. That would not have been done if they were not generating value through that first 6-month period.
Okay, thanks very much. Just moving on to some other concerns that the Auditor General's report raised with respect to the conflict of interest policies. So I note that you did respond to the Auditor General's recommendation, and you noted that all employees are required to affirm their compliance with the conflict of interest policy and to identify conflict of interest situations to their supervisors. So can you talk to us a little bit about the training? And you did mention training, and there may have been a recent review of the training that employees receive. But talk to us about that. What type of training employees undergo with respect to identifying those conflict of interests?
Yeah, so it's an annual training program, and there are quite a number of them in the company around business ethics and procurement and conflict of interest as well. So it would be a dedicated session just on conflict of interest, what it is, how to look for it, and where it might be a challenge. It'll also talk about what to do if there is actually a conflict of interest, which there are occasionally, and what are the mitigating factors. And when I say that there are conflicts of interest, quite a number of employees have spouses who work for professional companies, auditing firms, financial institutions, even construction partners or suppliers. So those types of conflicts are highlighted. You mentioned to their supervisors, but it's also the program is managed through our internal audit group and administered by them, and any potential conflicts are reviewed by them. If there is a real conflict, then they will identify a remediation plan or an action plan to ensure that no conflict actually goes through, and that person responsible is not actually put into a conflict position.
Okay, and I'm pretty sure I noted in there that the onus is actually on the employee to take initiative to identify and report those conflicts of interest as they develop. Is there onus on supervisors or managers to ask, are they supposed to be proactive in monitoring for these types of things?
I think, look, if supervisors are aware of a conflict, they will certainly raise that and discuss that with the employee. And again, I mentioned in my opening remarks that we do have a whistleblower program, and it is a good other check if something were to happen. It's a very active program, particularly during the construction period. It was a very active tool, and again, that routes through to our internal audit group, who is very adept at managing through those relationships. So I think there's been a lot of ongoing discussions across all levels of the company that I'm confident that the conflicts of interest have been identified.
Thank you. That is your time, Ms. Tesser-Dirksen.
Thank you.
Suivant pour 6 minutes, c'est Monsieur Lemire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur Stack.
Thank you.
Minimalement, plus de 25.
Mr. Stack, we know. Microphone, please. The interpreter regrets she cannot hear. The interpreter would like to ask that the question be repeated. The microphone was not on in the beginning.
N'arrivera pas à récupérer. Excusez-moi. Le gouvernement du Canada n'arrivera pas à...
The government of Canada will not be able to take back the money spent. There's a competition between Trans Mountain and the government's deficit in its budget. This is a generational deficit, and it is a significant loss of revenue. Can you help us understand by telling to the committee how much money will you make taxpayers lose? Will it be $25, $35, or $40 billion?
I thank the member for his question. In my opening remarks, again highlighted, and as one of the other members raised, the total project costs were around $34 billion. And I mentioned in my opening remarks that even in our first year of operation, the company returned $1.7 billion, or is on track to deliver $1.7 billion in 2025. So one of the reasons that I joined Trans Mountain was to ensure that government and Canada recovered its investment in Trans Mountain, and I have a lot of confidence that that will happen. Our 5-year plan is provided to CDEV and made publicly available, and in there you can see the forecast over the next 5 years of what will be returned to Canada, and that number is in excess of $10 billion between now and 2030.
Si je fais une règle de 3, ça nous amène pas loin de l'ensemble du déficit du Québec. Parce qu'on se rappelle que les
Quebecers are paying a significant part of this shortfall, and the value of the Canadian dollar is also a problem for the forestry industry. Phase 3 includes speaks to the government's ability to increase this debt, and we need to know how, or rather, do you have any potential buyers for this pipeline? What will be the price of the sale?
Thank you. So the Trans Mountain Corporation and its staff are not actively out marketing the company, so I can't really speak to buyers. As the owner of Trans Mountain, Canada and CDEV really are in the place to go out and decide if they do want to monetize some or all of a portion of the company. In some of the work and the valuations previously done, there were some values put out there by various government authorities that put the value somewhere in the $30 to $35 billion range, I believe. And I would note that those results are relatively stale and don't include any of the expansion opportunities the company has ahead of it. But really, the purview to sell the company is up to the government and CDEV at the end of the day.
Je vous remercie pour votre courage d'être devant.
Thank you for your courage in appearing today, because these are questions being asked by Quebecers. In February 2022, the government committed to offering further funding to the Trans Mountain project, but offered as well $18 million from taxpayer dollars through TMP Finance. That funding was approved by Chrystia Freeland in 2024, and that was considered refinancing spending in a report in response to a request for information. Trans Mountain said $3.3 billion is the debt to be refunded, and the $14 billion was given without needing to be refunded. Is that true? Can you confirm that you will be refunding that $18 billion?
Yeah, absolutely. You are correct. Back in December or early January, the government advanced additional funds to Trans Mountain in order to retire third-party bank debt. That third-party bank debt had been extremely costly during the risky parts of construction, and so the refinancing occurred after that. The expanded system was up and running and operational. We do absolutely intend to return the entire amount of funds that the government has advanced to us, both in the form of debt and equity. And so in my opening remarks, I mentioned the $1.7 billion was partially in the form of interest, partially in the form of other disbursements. Predominantly this year, it's all been equity dividends that have been sent back to the government. But the intent is that we will send back the $34 billion that the government has advanced.
Je vous remercie à niveau de les précisions.
Thank you for those clarifications. I know that it requires some courage to be here, and we thank you for it. I also would like to mention that as a Quebecer, the federal government did not give $1 for Hydro-Quebec, which has clean and renewable energy, and we have to pay a quarter of the price for a contract that is not going to be bringing much, but thank you for responding to our questions.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Beginning our second round, which will consist of 5 members for various times. Going to Mr. Kirk, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. My question will be to, excuse me here, Mr. Stack. So I'll begin with you. Ms. Farrell assumed the role of President and CEO of Trans Mountain Corporation in August of 2022, just 2 months before the October 2022 awarded the $32.9 million non-competitive contract to McKinsey & Company for professional services. Was she involved in any way in recommending or facilitating the McKinsey engagement?
I do not know if she was the original originator of recommending McKinsey, but as I mentioned earlier, the approval of the sole source to McKinsey was approved by the senior leadership team, including the CEO, which was Don Farrell at the time, the CFO, the Chief Project Execution Officer, and the Chief Commercial Officer. So it was reviewed and approved by the senior levels at Trans Mountain.
Thank you. Under Ms. Farrell's tenure, the cost for the Trans Mountain project ballooned from an initial $7.4 billion to $30.9 billion, and by March 2023, over $34 billion. That's over 5 times the original estimate. Why?
Well, I think that is the case that's in front of the CER at this point in time. And I would say that there's in-depth evidence given into that process, and that's still an ongoing rate case hearing. There were a number of contributing factors, and I don't want to go into too much detail because that is really the purview of the CER to assess all of those reasons. But there was, sort of a very unique period of time in the regulatory development. There was a lot of natural events that occurred and force majeure events, and there's a lot of contributing factors overall. But I would say that we really need to defer the CER process on that.
So for me personally, the reason why I asked this, I find this very concerning, because she is the head of the new major projects office. And with a track record of going 5 times over, I personally don't think that Canadians would be delighted to hear that she got $700,000, a brand new $700,000 a year job. That's why I'm asking these questions. But I'll move on to another question. The Auditor General highlighted that the Trans Mountain failed to properly follow procurement policy rules. In your view as the CFO, how did Ms. Farrell's leadership contribute to these failures? And has there been a review into the decisions made under her leadership to make sure that this kind of problem doesn't happen again?
Well, I would focus it in onto the procurement decisions of Dawn Farrell. She has been in business for an extended period of time. She is very familiar with the procurement policies. As you mentioned, she came into the company, well after construction had started and well after that $7.5 billion number was in place. As far as the procurement strategies go, the decisions to sole source are absolutely appropriate, or not appropriate, but acceptable, or they're an allowed practice within our company and within our policies. And at the time, we were spending significant amount of money, hundreds of millions of dollars per month on construction, and McKinsey brought very unique and specialized skills into the company. And I know that that's what would have been discussed at the leadership level at that time.
I understand that. I understand that, but can you understand that when the Canadians look into this and we're 5 times over budget and a $32.9 million non-competitive contract was given out, it's a big concern. And now it's an even bigger concern that she heads the major projects office. As the CFO, what oversight of financial approvals, what kind of guardrails and checks were in place in the contract to make sure that the value for money was achieved for this $32 million contract?
Yep. Well, certainly for a contract of that magnitude, it would have to go right up to the executive level for decision-making approval. So, and then, as I mentioned, it was originally let as a 6-month contract under various terms of fixed price, cost recovery, as well as value for delivery. And so it was an ongoing measure that the contract extended only if value is being delivered.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Keurig. Up next is Mr. Housefather, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Stack, for being here. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. First of all, you started in October 2024 as the CFO, correct?
That's correct.
And Ms. Farrell had already stepped down as president and CEO of the company in September when she became the board chair herself, right? So you never worked there while she was president and CEO?
That is correct.
Okay, so you only worked with her in the capacity of board chair.
Correct, at Trans Mountain.
Yeah.
I have worked with Ms. Farrell previously in another role.
Perfect, and I assume you believe her to be competent, correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Because for some reason I'm getting the impression that somebody's trying to prove that she's not. I don't know why. So let's get to this contract in itself. There were implications before that people from outside the organization had influenced the decision of Trans Mountain to move forward with this contract. Do you know that to be false?
That is false. There was no outside influence. It was an internally initiated engagement.
As you would expect. So at Trans Mountain, I know that you weren't there, so you're only reconstructing from the contract and from board minutes, perhaps, what actually happened. But is it your understanding that within the policies that Trans Mountain had at the time, that the contract was correctly approved by the entities within the company that should have approved it?
So as I mentioned, sole sourcing and approvals can be done, and they were done at the appropriate level. As the Auditor General noted, there was a lag in the documentation required for that, but that was completed after the fact.
And would an engagement like this, you've talked about approval of the executive management team. I also, in my past life, was a general counsel at a multinational. A contract of this magnitude, in my experience, would also have at least been mentioned to the board of directors in a report, if not approved by the board of directors. Was this contract brought up at a board meeting?
I don't have direct knowledge of that. I apologize. I can follow up with that and get back to the committee. But you're right. An initiative like this is not just costly in dollar cents. It's also costly on an internal resource allocation and dedication. It is a distraction, it is an extra piece of work. And so these types of engagements are thoroughly thought through as to what the what the effort will be required from internal people, as well as the potential value generated.
Right, and given the fact, and this is why I'm suspecting this probably was brought up at the board, given the fact that there was an attempt to, hire, which you'd understand why you'd be hiring somebody outside to advise on how to streamline operations and how to more effectively manage resources of the corporation, one would assume that this had been brought up as a concern at the board of directors, a feeling that there needed to be improvement as part of a continuous improvement process, and that at the very least this would have been a thought through to move forward in that type of direction, which is a resource user.
I would agree. That's correct.
Okay,
Yep.
so you'll come back and let us know if it did, because of course that would mean more independent eyes were actually on this and approved the idea of doing that. Can I also ask, in terms of what you've changed in terms of the conflict of interest policies, because I see that you've replied back to the committee that there have been changes. Can you just walk through the changes to the conflict of interest training and policy?
Yeah, and I would say, look, conflict of interest has been something that's been embedded in our business code of conduct for a long period of time, but it was embedded in the code of conduct. And so the sign-offs and the approvals were done as a larger policy. Since this report and the changes to the policy is that conflict of interest was actually removed or segregated from the broader business ethics sign-off to a standalone training program and a standalone declaration and a standalone, so education, declaration, and sign-off. So it was really brought out to a standalone item.
And the recommendations for the Auditor General didn't simply apply to Trans Mountain. There was a discussion within the Auditor General report of modernizing conflict of interest policies. The Auditor General never implied that there was a violation of Trans Mountain's conflict of interest policy, correct?
No, they did not, to my knowledge.
I didn't see that anywhere.
No.
Because it seemed, again, for some reason, that there was some implication that there was a conflict of interest somewhere. Are you aware of any conflict of interest whatsoever at Trans Mountain that related to this specific contract to McKinsey?
No, not aware of any.
Has anyone internally, a whistleblower, voiced concern ever that there was conflict of interest related to awarding of this contract?
Not related to this contract, no, absolutely not.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Griswold.
Thank you very much.
A little extra time there as well. Suivant. And of course, just to remind you all, the Office of the Auditor General is here. If you have any questions directly for them, they are more than happy to answer them, I am sure. Suivant, c'est Monsieur Lemire pour 2 minutes.
Mr. Lemire, you have 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Stack, you awarded a contract of $32 billion to McKinsey, hoping that it would help you save costs, and yet that is up to your employees. But often, or as is done with the rest of the federal public service, often we use McKinsey. Why use that company? Can you give an example of cost savings thanks to McKinsey?
Thank you. Look, as I've mentioned, the cost-saving initiatives were being generated internally by employees, but given the size and magnitude of the project, we have not limited, but we have finite capabilities and ability to execute. And so bringing in somebody like McKinsey gives you additional arms and legs, a new generation of ideas going out forward. There was a broad range of initiatives created and led through the various project managers and the various teams. It has everything to do with utilization of standby equipment, where to source materials for particular work, how to mobilize crews to and from in more efficient manners. McKinsey has dealt...
également que McKinsey avait...
Did you know that McKinsey had contracts with other pipeline companies when you awarded the contract?
No, not specifically.
Parce que, bon.
If you didn't do that verification, it's interesting to see that Suncor, Synovus, or Canadian Natural Resources Limited are against paying more. Those three businesses are among McKinsey's clients. According to the Institute for Sustainable Development, we're talking about billions of dollars. You're talking about cost saving, but why not look at increasing what is paid by these gas companies?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. McKinsey is well known through a lot of the large corporations for the value that they bring, and I don't know specifically if those companies you mentioned have used them in the past, but they do bring a good history of working on mega projects and large projects to get the efficiencies required at the end of the day. The overall asking for I think it was the oil companies to pay the fees, that really forms part of the overall rate process that's in front of the CER at this time, and it will be up to them to help adjudicate on which costs are allowed through into the toll.
Merci.
Thank you.
Et on vous remercie.
And we thank you.
Stevenson, please, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go to Mr. Hayes just to mix it up a little bit. In light of yesterday's budget, where we've had some changing definitions of what is an operating expense versus capital expense, in your audit, did you notice then that there was some deviations or changes through how they were defining some of these rules that were in regards to the conflict of interests or on that part?
Thank you very much. We didn't see that there was a change in interpretation or anything like that. Our findings were really focused on the importance of pursuing the conflict of interest declarations by everyone that's involved in the procurement processes early in the process so that decisions could be made knowing full well that everybody is independent.
So with that, in your audit, the review of TMX, you've found that the conflict of interest rules were not any different than they were previously. It's just that some of the rules were not always followed up on in regards to, as we've talked in the past, that if you don't have, and I don't know if it's just that if you don't have proof, then you can't say that you actually did it, or if it was proof that they just didn't do it.
So I want to make sure that I'm clear on this. The statements that we made about conflict of interest were general in nature on the basis of the sampling that we did across both departments and Crown corporations. It was a general finding. There was only a few organizations where we found strong practices all the way through the process, which is why we made the recommendation. I wouldn't want to make a comment about Trans Mountain Corporation's ethical practices specifically here because I don't have that level of detail in the way that we did this audit.
Okay, thank you. So in this process, just kind of ignoring necessarily Trans Mountain, but the overall government process, have you noticed a change or just the lack in not following through? And is it just this department? Or because I seem to see a theme in some of your audits that a lot of the rules are not necessarily being followed. So I'm just wondering whether or not you can compare that to some of your other audits, whether this conflict of interest has been an issue in any other areas that haven't been proven or shown.
Thank you. Indeed, when we did, we've done now a series of audits on procurement practices over a number of years. Granted, they have been looking at the same period of time, so our findings are consistent across those audits. What we have been finding is that there's a frequent disregard for the rules, and that's important when you look at what these rules and policies are there to achieve: fairness, transparency, and best use of taxpayer dollars. So whether it's on procurement practices or on conflict of interest rules, basically what we have been saying to the government is moving forward, make sure that everybody understands these rules and applies them. That's how you're going to get the best outcome for Canadians.
And just to follow that up one step further, could we say that this set of rules should be applied to every single government department on every single project that we go forward, to have the same rules so there's not different interpretations when they go to different departments?
Well, herein lies the difference with Trans Mountain in particular. When we look at government rules, those would apply to government departments and agencies. The next level, of course, is Crown corporations, which are at an arm's length. And in the case of Trans Mountain Corporation, this is a wholly owned subsidiary of a parent Crown, CDEV. So as you get further and further from a government department, the latitude that these organizations have is a bit different. When it comes to conflict of interest and ethics, I think the fundamental principles should be the same. When it comes to procurement practices, we recognize that there will be variations. The government's procurement policies will not apply the same way.
So, in just going one step further than that, would you suggest that perhaps we should have the same rules extended all the way through to the Crown corporations as the government departments?
That would be a question I don't think I am equipped to answer. That's a matter of policy. I think what's important is to recognize that as the government relies on Crown corporations or wholly owned subsidiaries to carry out some of these functions, it is aware of the operating environment for these organizations.
Okay. I'll take one. How much time do I have left?
Brief
just
question.
One question for Mr. Stack, that perhaps we had the conversation, or you were mentioning about the information that was coming from McKinsey as reports from my colleagues as to suggestions and whether. I was just wondering if we could actually get some of those reports. You'd talked about them, but I don't think we necessarily saw some of those details yet. Now, I don't know if we could maybe get those submitted to the committee.
I'm just going to stop there. Is that clear, Mr. Stack, or is that?
No, I'm not clear on which reports the member is referring to.
Do you want to clarify that, or should I come back to you?
Just there was some written advice about including any memos and presentations from McKinsey to Trans Mountain on how to proceed on savings and that sort of thing. But and I don't know if you have those that we could, if it would be appropriate to present.
Go ahead, Mr. Stack. Let's hear it. Mr. Stack, go ahead, please.
Well, I would say that the engagements with McKinsey were very extensive over that 12 or 13-month period, with regular meetings and long laundry lists of initiatives compiled, sent up to management through the committee. I believe those have all been filed again as part of the CER process and is a matter of public record there.
Thank you. That we'll investigate that. Thank you. Before we go to Mr. Osborne, just so everyone knows, I'm going to do another just half round. So after Mr. Osborne, we'll hear from Mr. Detel, Mr. Lemire, and then finally I have Ms. Yip, but of course, can be anyone on your side, and then we'll wrap things up. So, Mr. Osborne, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much. I'll start with the Auditor General's office. Mr. Hayes, the Auditor General has outlined a couple of times now that there are rules in place, they exist. The solution isn't necessarily about creating new rules, but rather making sure that the rules are well understood and properly applied. Further to that, I know that the Treasury Board, based on the Auditor General's findings of several reviews, have updated the Manager's Guide, introduced new mandatory procedures, for procuring professional services, published the Directive on Digital Talent to build internal capacity and ensure that if there is internal capacity, there's no need to go outside, and completed a horizontal audit examining the governance, decision-making, and contract controls. So I would think Treasury Board has gone even beyond knowing that rules were there. If they were followed, things would have been much different with your reviews. But Treasury Board, with the rules they've put in place, have gone even further. Can you talk a little bit about that and, the rules that have been put in place and how that should impact, if those rules, the more stringent rules, again, are followed, how we can avoid situations like the Auditor General has found?
Thank you. Yes, we are aware of changes and adjustments that Treasury Board has introduced. I would also say that Public Service and Procurement Canada has also introduced some elements that are intended to strengthen both conflict of interest and procurement rules. Our audits are typically, they're always backwards looking. And when we're talking about things that are in the past, it's difficult to look at how these rules would change things. All that I can say is that as we move forward with future audits on procurement, we'll be looking at exactly how those rules have been implemented. It's great to have rules. I think one of the messages from the Auditor General is that there were rules in place, maybe they weren't always followed. So we'll be looking to see whether the more, I guess, new rules have been applied by public servants.
Okay. Thank you. I guess going to Mr. Stack now, I know that the more arm's length you get from central government, sometimes the less rules that are put in place apply. With the new rules that Treasury Board has put in place, is there a commitment from Trans Mountain that you will look at the rules that Treasury Board has put in place with a focus on adopting those as well?
I'm not familiar with the new rules put in place by the Treasury Board, but I can commit to reviewing those and looking at them and see if there are applications for Trans Mountain.
Okay. Going a little bit beyond the review and by the Auditor General, I just want to get some understanding of the benefits of Trans Mountain for Canadians and the Treasury. With the changing landscape for trade with our partner south of the border, can you talk a little bit about how Trans Mountain, the focus has shifted, and for projects like Trans Mountain and the need for avenues outside of the relationship south of the border?
Well, I think you raise a good point. When I originally joined Trans Mountain, I was expecting a lot of opposition to the company as it was online and moving more oil liquids. That has changed significantly in the last 6 to 8 months with the focus and the understanding that having a single trading partner causes challenges for Canada. And so Trans Mountain has allowed about 600,000 barrels a day to be exported off the docks into foreign markets, whether they be Asian markets or even some other markets globally.
Just want to get a sense as well, can you advise of the overall benefits of the project to Canadians, the Treasury, the economy in terms of direct jobs, indirect jobs, Canadian goods and services that Trans Mountain has procured and acquired? So I guess the spin-off benefits as well as, you talked a little bit about revenue to government. Can you elaborate on that a little more?
I think I would not do it justice. There's been a number of reports done in the past and others being updated, and I think I would be not doing it justice by trying to recall numbers off the top of my head. Those are large discussions, and at Trans Mountain, I would say that I tend to focus more on the operations of Trans Mountain, and it's really up to other CDEV and others to understand the broader country or national interest being generated. But you are right that with an extra 600,000 barrels, 600,000 barrels of production in oil, that creates billions of dollars of follow-on benefit to Alberta and to Canadians through taxes and other avenues.
Thank you. That is
but there are more comprehensive reports out there.
Yes. Thank you very much. We all believe in piping oil now, pumping oil. It's wonderful. Beginning our third round, suivant, c'est M. Deltel pour 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Deltel, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I would like to come back to the heart of the report that we requested. So contracts given to Mackenzie from 2011 to 2023. On page 9, there are 2 tables. And we can see that up until 2016, there wasn't a lot of variation, about $2 million in contracts for the federal government. I would like to remind you that in 2016 or 2015, that's when Mr. Trudeau's government came into power. From 2016 to 2023, it increases significantly. If we look at 2016 to 2022, the contracts awarded by the federal government to all companies go from $5 to $8.5 billion. So that's an increase of 70%, which is enormous. And they hired tens of thousands of public servants. Often, if you need more public servants, you need fewer private contracts. But the increase was 70%. For those who are listening who think that's a lot, that's nothing. It's nothing compared to McKinsey. McKinsey in 2016 was receiving $2 million worth of contracts, and in 2022, $55 million. That it increased 27-fold. A company that had a value of about $2 million for contracts, and then the percentage went up by 27 times. Thank you for the question. I believe that I can say that it's important to optimize public resources. At every opportunity, we need to look at the contracts and the work that could be carried out by public servants before awarding a contract. That is important. With our audits and our report, we have flagged issues regarding resource optimization. There are a lot of public funds that are awarded for professional contracts, and it is up to the government to look at the reasons behind those contracts and what the results are. Your response is very cautious, Mr. Hayes, but for those listening, they must be shocked to hear that a business saw its contracts increase so significantly in such a short period of time from 2016 to 2022, whereas the government had given 70% more contracts, and it is unacceptable. Chair, in this report, we have understood that 97 contracts were given to 10 departments worth millions of dollars. But the issue there is with the quality of work. 70% of the contracts were not competitive for a value of $118 million. Contracts often did not respect procurement rules. The justifications were not there, and there was no confirmation of delivery. And so overall, everything was done incorrectly. How can you explain that to us? Thank you for the question. That was an example of another message shared by the Auditor General. It's a significant lack of respect for the processes. In this report, we found a few organizations that were doing good work for that. Mr. Hayes, I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to end with a question. Your work shows that there are rules, but the rules were not applied when given contracts to McKinsey. You defined that if we were to respect the rules, there's no issue. So we don't need new rules. We don't need new steps. We just need to apply the rules correctly, and then there wouldn't be an issue. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you to the Auditor General.
Et merci beaucoup, Monsieur Deltel.
Thank you, Mr. Deltel. Mr. Lemire, you have 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Stack, the Institute for Energy and Financial Analysis published in September 2025 a report, Canada should learn from the Trans Mountain fiscal issues. And so the public funding for Trans Mountain and the use of public funds to fund oil projects could increase the debt in Canada. How do you respond to concerns regarding the impacts of this on Canada's public funding?
Thank you for the question. Look, I can't speak broadly about future projects in the oil industry or the report specifically that you mentioned. I can say again that the funds advanced to complete the Trans Mountain pipeline are well invested, and the company is committed to returning capital, significant capital, to the government of Canada and paying that debt back over time. Maybe I'll leave it there.
Merci. Comme il me reste un peu de temps, je vais poser une question.
I have a bit of time left, so I'll ask a question to Mr. Hayes regarding public contracts. As you know, I'm spokesperson for relations with Indigenous people, and according to the First Nations, there are a lot of contracts given to companies that find themselves in Ottawa-Gatineau, even though most First Nations are outside of the region. Patty Sometime wrote that often contracts are given to companies found in Ottawa-Gatineau. Should we look into whether or not the Indigenous identity is verified before awarding a contract, and verify companies that self-identify as being Indigenous, whereas they are not? This is a topic that is on our radar. It was an issue regarding our report on ArriveCan. It is something that we could be looking into in the future. Thank you, Miigwech. Thank you again. And finally, Ms. Yip.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And thank you to the witnesses for coming today. Mr. Hayes, the report notes that with respect to Crown corporations, each corporation is responsible for developing and implementing its own procurement policies and procedures, and essentially responsible for safeguarding its own resources. Would it be fair to say that by virtue to manage resources, that additional oversight would be redundant? For example, public servants are already required to follow the values and ethics code and the directive on conflict of interest. Do you think that this internal safeguarding of resources is enough of an oversight mechanism to keep Crown corporations accountable?
Well, thank you. I think, again, this is...
Just one second, Mr. Hayes, your mic's not on, so just give it, please, from the top.
Sorry about that. So I think, again, this is one of the examples of where the Crown corporations being further away from government departments, they have a different operating structure. So there's a board of directors that oversees the activities of the Crown corporation. Those directors are appointed in various different ways depending on the Crown corporation. There's also, of course, the management governance that applies in the corporation. I don't think that in the context of the Crown corporations, we would expect the same application of policies and rules that exist in the federal government. However, there are some fundamental principles that should be followed, whether it's relating to conflict of interest or whether it's relating to good governance and controls of funds. With Crown corporations, we are talking about organizations that, by virtue of being connected to the federal government, they're dealing with public funds. To me and to our office, that brings a higher level of responsibility in terms of the way that Canadians would expect these organizations to operate. And it's easy, I think, to forget that when you're in the throes of a business challenge, that you are also supposed to be keeping the taxpayer at the top of your mind. Thank you.
Mr. Stack, would you like to comment on that?
I would concur and agree. I don't really have too much to add that Mr. Hayes did not.
Okay. Recently, the Treasury Board has updated the manager's guide and put in place new mandatory procedures to support stronger procurement practices. In your view, how do these instruments help meet the standards your office is required?
Sorry, if that's directed to me. Look, I think we are always looking for ways to improve our procurement practices, and we will, as I mentioned in my opening statements, we appreciate input and any new advice that we can get to consider in adding into our procurement practices.
Okay. You mentioned there is a whistleblower program, and that it was a good check. Has it been effective? Has it been a good check?
It has. In particular, during the construction of the projects, there were thousands of contractors and employees out working on behalf of Trans Mountain to complete the project, and there was a regular usage of that line to relay a number of different either conflicts or other issues associated with it. So it's a good program that people have. If they see something that looks wrong or feels wrong, they have an avenue. They can come in anonymous or not anonymous, however they choose to, in order to raise any issues to senior management.
Okay. And Mr. Hayes, is there anything you wanted to add?
Well, I think, I'll make sure this is on. I think that just taking the opportunity with Trans Mountain Corporation here today, what I would say is that the big finding that we included in our report about Trans Mountain was the importance of connecting a sole source justification or a non-competitive justification. I use those words sole source because that's what's in their policy, but a non-competitive justification to a contract of this magnitude. Questions arise when you have a big contract that you haven't gone out to market to see whether there's a way to get best value for money. And when the auditors come in and are looking for direct links to why management determined that a non-competitive contract should be used, it raises questions about transparency, fairness, and best value for money. Again, though, it's important to recognize that we're talking about a subsidiary of a Crown corporation. So it's a few levels of arm's length away from the center of government sort of policies. And that's important. We've talked in this committee in the past, in previous parliaments, about how difficult things get as you get further away from government in terms of the expectations that apply to regular departments and agencies. Thank you.
Mr. Stack, how can you reassure Canadians about what Mr. Hayes just said about how, as Crown corporations, you're farther away from the government? How can you reassure that the standards will still be there?
Yeah,
and met,
thank you.
Complied with?
No, I would, again, as in our opening statements in our response, our detailed action plan, I think a lot of the findings within the Auditor General's report apply both to corporations, Crown corporations, as well as to government offices. There wasn't anything in there that we don't already see in our processes, and appreciate the feedback, and we do endeavor to continue to improve our procurement practices and our policies associated with it.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Yip. Thank you all very much. Mr. Stack, I just want to loop back around. You had some requests for information. One was dealt with from Mr. Stevenson about some information that you say is publicly available, and I appreciate that. Mr. Detel asked for some information. You endeavored to get back to us. If you could do so in the next 3 weeks, and I'd urge you to be as transparent as possible. The committee can also always come back to you and ask for additional information, so I would urge you to be as transparent and as forthcoming as possible, if you wouldn't mind. And if we could get that from you within 3 weeks, please.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you have any questions about that, you can come back to the clerk if anything is unclear, and she and the analysts will endeavor to help you. And if they have a problem, they'll talk to me. and I'll present your submission to this committee member in a couple weeks. Again, I want to thank you, Mr. Stack, for appearing here today, along with the Office of the Auditor General, in relation to Study 5 of the report, Professional Service Contract of the 2024 Reports 5 to 7 of the Auditor General of Canada. I'm going to, in a minute, just suspend this meeting. The witnesses are excused. Thank you very much. I'll come back in about 5 minutes for everyone. So this meeting is suspended. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
back to order. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to just deal with a couple of matters. I think in every parliament, it's worth reminding committee members and I suppose our partners, our witnesses, our audience, just some of the expectations around committee work. The last couple of weeks, I've just noticed a kind of laxness when it came to some witnesses, and even securing some witnesses is something I take quite seriously. So I want to deal with two issues. One is when this committee looks at auditor reports, who's to appear, and number two, the requirements to appear when you've been when a individual or entity's been summoned. So, and I'm not planning to name anyone today. I want to just send the signal because I know in public there'll be many people who will be reminded of the obligations of appearing before committees and to come in. So, first of all, when this committee looks for a witness to come in to appear for an auditor report, it is to be the accounting level officer. I just want to turn to the analyst to kind of state that clearly, what the expectation is around that. If you can just cite that, please, for the record.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon to the members. In the Financial Administration Act, Section 16.3 defines accounting officer. With respect to departments, it's the deputy minister, and with respect to the other parts of the public service, it is the persons identified, whether it's the titles can be different, whereas commissioner, president, etc., but it's a person occupying the senior most position within the non-department type entities, like agencies and boards and such that are part of the government. Within the framework of ministerial accountability, the Act also speaks to the accountability of accounting officers. In particular, 16.41 states that they are to appear before the appropriate committees of the Senate and the House of Commons for measures taken to organize the resources of the department to deliver departmental programs in compliance with government policies and procedures. There are other matters relating to keeping of accounts, keeping effective systems of control, and the performance of other specific duties. Within the framework of a ministerial accountability in the same sort of area, it states that accounting officers are also to appear before committees of the Senate and the House of Commons. There is an obligation to appear to answer questions put towards them in respect to the carrying out of all of the responsibilities and the performance of those duties referred to in subsection 1 or 2, as the case may be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. This is important because it does arise from time to time that an entity will confirm. We expect the accounting officer to show up, and then we're told at the last minute sometimes that it won't be that person. It could be the individual who knows the program well and can speak to it. Now, it's fine for that person to attend, provided the accounting officer also attends. I'm raising this because, as your chairman, I try to schedule meetings so the work continues in an efficient manner. And what I always do is refer to the analyst, or ask the analyst straight out, is this person able? And sometimes there are rare exceptions when a number 2 is. But it's actually our analysts who are usually the firmest in terms of ensuring that we have an accounting officer here to answer questions related to the auditor's recommendations, so we then can make recommendations and then hold them to account. So there's no other action on that. If you have any questions, I'm certainly open to it, but I just wanted to get that on the record to empower the clerk. When that comes back, she can respond very firmly that as the chair has instructed and this committee is aware, and as the law states, this is not just a recommendation, this is the Financial Administrative Act, the law states who is to appear for auditor reports. Any questions on that? Oui, Monsieur Lemierre.
Ben, je veux souligner, Monsieur.
I just wanted to highlight that you are raising a very significant point, and you did a good job. And there was a budget adopted by a minority of parliamentarians, and so it is even more important to look at the role of public accounts. We need to have the right people here to respond to our questions, and thank you for raising the issue. Thank you.
Next is around accepting invitations, which are loosely defined as invitations. There's that great line in the Top Gun movie where thank you for accepting the invitation, Maverick, and someone reminds them they're called orders. We have different levels of orders in this Parliament. We always ask nicely at first, then we can pass motions, and ultimately we can pass, we can summon witnesses. I've just noticed in the last couple of weeks a bit of laxness when it's come to getting back to the clerk quickly and giving us dates. So I think actually I will have the clerk just go over the process to summons a witness. I'm not suggesting we do that. I know it is a high elevation, and we don't do this lightly. But I do want witnesses when they receive an invitation from this committee to respond to it and give us a date forthwith. And I am flexible. The clerk is as well. But I am just I want to tackle this early in the session so we have departments as well as Crown corporations, when they are asked to come, take it seriously and recognize the powers that this committee has to ultimately summons people. And I don't like to do it by email. I like to send the bailiff, and we've done one in my 3 years. Again, we don't do it rashly, but it is something that we do reserve. Would you just mind going through those, clerk, just so community members are aware of it? It might be instructive for new members, and as well, our broader audience is as well that we do have powers to compel people to come in should they not work with you to schedule a time.
No problem. So the committee has the power to send for persons, so to summon, according to Standing Order 108-1A. So a committee exercises this power by adopting a motion to summon one or more individuals to appear before either in person or by video conference at a set date, time, and location. So this is done by way of motion. So a motion is moved. If it is adopted, then a summons is then signed by the chair and then served by bailiff, as the chair has said. Summons applies to any person on Canadian soil, except for House of Commons or Senate parliamentarians. So that's how it's done. It's by way of motion.
Thank you very much. So look, I'm not looking for any action from the committee today. I am going to open up a couple of other dates for some witnesses to get back to us with firm commitments to come in. And if that does not happen by this time next week, then I might look for your support to take action. At that point, I will perhaps begin to name. So that's where we are. I just want to bring up to date on that. There's no actions. Any questions around this before I just wrap things up? Okay, very good. I think some of you are familiar with this. Lastly, there's no meeting this Thursday, so enjoy your half day, time to get caught up in other areas. In a week today, we're going to go back to draft reports. That list will come to you shortly, and then at the end of next week, it's the Canada-wide early learning and child care systems. So that's where we are. Any others? Yes, oui, Monsieur Lemire.
J'aimerais juste vous poser la question.
I had a question, Chair. Is there a link to be made between canceling Thursday's meeting and looking at committee reports and not having a response to our invitation to witnesses?
Well, so
not for this Thursday. There were discussions among the whips, perhaps not all of them, but regarding witnesses at another committee. They thought that they might need our time slot. Next week, though, yes.
Father had suggested just a limited, I think it was 2 meetings on the professional services contract. I thought that was a bit tight. It's turned out to be 3, it's not going to be 4. And I don't, Mr. House Father, I am aware of the committee's time. And while I endeavor to fit everyone in, sometimes it goes over, but it's at, for example, today We had one witness. I'm certainly glad he appeared. For this report, we have numerous witnesses. It has been my intention to bundle them in, deux, trois, pour une réunion.
Have 2 or 3 of them for one meeting.
And so I need to get back to that and get people a little more focused on some time. So we will get back to the draft report. We do have them outstanding, and Ms. Yip, of course, is fond of reminding me to get them done, and she's right to do that, and we're going to get them done, Ms. Yip. So we'll come back to those next week. And I realize for some members, because these reports hang over us from a previous Parliament, you've not been engaged with them, so I appreciate your willingness to get this done. We will soon be into our own reports from this Parliament, and you'll be much more engaged with those, I'm sure. Très bien. All right. Any other questions, comments? Without further ado, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Enjoy your Thursday. We'll see you next week.